I think the last place you want to die is in a hospital.
The last 3 years of his life were just in a bed, in a care home, staring at the ceiling.
What's the best place to die in is quite interesting.
Our cities and the people who live in them are changing. By 2050, there will be more over 65s than under 16s for the first time in human history. There is also projected to be over 70% of people living in cities and urban environments. To consider living longer, we must also consider death and question our current attitudes towards the subject. A 2017 Macmillan study showed that of people with cancer, only 1% wanted to die in hospital, yet 38% did die in hospital. And studies have shown that loneliness and ill health are intertwined. The act of talking about death can seem like a taboo, yet 64% of people in the UK think we should talk more about death. Our reluctance around this issue wasn't always the case. Historically, the deathbed was seen as a place of gathering and celebration, as shown in this painting of a deathbed scene. Renaissance artists often reminded us of the universal truth of death through memento mori woven into their work. But with the advent of modern medicine, death has become medicalised and separated from life.
This research and design proposition aims to be applicable across London and cities more generally. However, our architectural explorations manifested themselves on a very particular area, the South Bank of London. The area is home to significant galleries, cultural and educational institutions, as well as some housing. The site itself is an underused car park site, situated at the south end of the National Theatre. The land is owned by Coin Street Community Builders, a progressively minded social enterprise and developer that run a range of activities for local people.
To understand what could work well for designing for the elderly, we looked to architectural precedents. These highlighted design considerations such as allowing for shared threshold spaces to become more personalised, flexible spaces allowing for recreation as a preventative health measure, and even spaces for the bodies of deceased residents to be visited by loved ones.
Our research led us to identifying key ingredients for living and dying well in the city: connected living, health and well-being, provision for end of life, and visibility of death. The framework for the spatial application of our findings was this tree trunk diagram, exploring the levels of connections we have with the city and our communities. Moving from self out to the citywide lens, these rings begin to describe activities and spaces connected to dying, and activities and spaces connected to living. From this, we distill these elements into potential spaces that begin to address the issues and themes that we have highlighted. Flexible spaces for people to come together, as well as functional spaces to facilitate chance encounters, which our research taught us is crucial in helping to tackle loneliness. Beginning at the center of the tree trunk with the self, the development of characters informed by local demographics acted as a lens for spatial development. The city is designed for younger people. There is an under-provision for the elderly. Therefore, we are focusing on the ages from retirement until death. That is not to exclude those younger than 66. Our proposition is intergenerational. It is important for various ages to communicate, live, and share life experiences side by side in the city.
Similarities in typical daily routines begin to give us tips for potential overlaps across age groups, and how people live alongside each other around a shared courtyard offers space for these overlaps.
Party diagrams acted as the basis of how typologies of residents could come together and live alongside each other. Whether that's space to cook, eat together, party, or gather around the deathbed. Through these activities, architectural elements begin to form. Opening thresholds, courtyard spaces, or more heavyweight spaces. These elements come together to form a typology of a cluster, accommodation set around a shared courtyard with shared buildings.
As well as considering the relationship of spaces on the horizontal plane, the vertical relationships were also important, with stepped courtyards offering space to interact across different levels. This research and testing led to residential relationships for the upper floors of our proposal. The ground floor is given over to more social activities, both for the building community, i.e. the residents of the development, and for the wider urban community.
Spaces such as a laundrette are functional for the residents while offering space for chance encounters. Another practical space is a workshop, which offers space for the development's handyman, a role that we learned through our research to be very important for forming informal, uninstitutionalized relationships with older people. More universal spaces can hold a range of activities, whether that's the building's living room or a solid space. In this solid space, we see a Mao reflecting the preparation for the washing of a body of a recently deceased resident. Awake. A children's birthday party. Or Aisha having a quiet moment whilst her children are at school. The flexibility of this space allows for activities pertaining to both life and death, and the tension in between them.
Moving out of the tree trunk diagram, we begin to look at how the architecture relates to Coin Street and the wider urban context. Residents are able to grow old surrounded by the cultural buildings and activities of the South Bank. The solid space of the building acts as a memento mori facing the Thames, visible to the city through the prominent axis on the South Bank between the IBM building and the National Theatre.
Our spatial explorations have been accompanied by a process of collaborative drawing, expressing the spirit and ideas of our research, coming together to form an architecture that is both specific to its site, whilst also acting as a potential typology applicable across cities throughout the world.